Captain Li Wu was drinking his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. He sat in the command center of Luna Base watching Earth rise over the moon's horizon like he had done every morning for 3 years. The blue marble looked peaceful and beautiful hanging in the black space around it. He never imagined that in the next few minutes everything humans believed about their place in the cosmos would be shattered. The first sign something was wrong came from the deep space sensors. Technician Hensel called out from her station that they were picking up massive energy readings from the edge of the solar system. Li Wu set down his coffee and walked over to look at the displays. The numbers made no sense. The energy signature was bigger than anything humans had ever detected, and it was moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. Then the message came. The air in the command center shimmered and twisted like heat waves rising from hot pavement. A three-dimensional image formed in the center of the room, showing beings that looked nothing like anything from Earth. They stood tall with gray skin that seemed to glow softly in the strange light. Their eyes were large and black without any visible pupils, and their mouths were thin lines that barely moved when they spoke. The voice that came from the image was cold and mechanical, like it was being spoken through a computer. The universal translator must have been working because Li Wu could understand every terrible word. Primitive species of soul. 3. You will present yourselves before the Galactic Council within 1 solar rotation. You will submit to our authority, accept our guidance, and provide the required tribute of resources and population for galactic service. Li Wu felt his blood turn to ice. The aliens continued speaking as if they were reading from a shopping list. Your planet will provide 20% of all mine materials, including rare earth elements and radioactive substances. 10% of your population will be selected for galactic labor service. Your military forces will be disbanded immediately. All weapons of mass destruction will be surrendered to Council oversight. Failure to comply will result in the complete sterilization of your world. The message flickered and disappeared, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Li Wu stared at the empty space where the aliens had been. His hands were shaking, and he realized he was still holding his coffee cup. The liquid had gone cold, but he barely noticed. Across the solar system, similar messages were appearing in government buildings, military bases, and research facilities. Dr. Kim Soo was in her laboratory in Seoul when the hologram materialized next to her microscope. She had been studying samples of deep ocean bacteria when the aliens interrupted her work. The scientist in her was fascinated by the technology that could project three-dimensional images across space, but the human in her was terrified by what they were demanding. Ambassador Park Ji was in a meeting with the United Nations when the message appeared in the assembly hall. The delegates from nearly 200 countries sat in shocked silence as the aliens made their demands. Park Ji had spent his entire career working on international cooperation and peace. Now he realized all of humanity's problems seemed tiny compared to what they were facing. The aliens spoke about humans like they were livestock to be managed. They mentioned other species that had refused to cooperate and how those worlds were now empty rocks floating in space. The message was clear: obey or die. In his laboratory deep beneath the Swiss mountains, Dr. Yun-ho was working on experimental faster-than-light travel. When the aliens made their announcement, he had been trying to figure out how to bend space and time to allow human ships to travel between stars. Now he realized that other beings had already mastered this technology, and they were using it to threaten Earth. The 24-hour deadline began counting down immediately. News networks around the world tried to make sense of what was happening. Religious leaders called for prayer while scientists scrambled to verify if the message was real. Military commanders checked their weapons and realized how useless they would be against beings who could travel between stars. Li Wu called an emergency meeting with Earth Defense Command. Within 2 hours, representatives from every major nation were connected by secure video links. President Cho Min joined from the presidential bunker in Seoul, her face grim but determined. General Martinez connected from the Pentagon in Washington. Dr. Kim Soo left her laboratory to attend from the Korean Science Ministry. The debate that followed would determine the fate of humanity. Some argued that they should try to negotiate. The aliens clearly had technology far beyond human understanding. Maybe they could find some middle ground that would save lives. Others pointed out that the aliens had not come to negotiate. They had come to issue orders like humans were already their property. Dr. Yun-ho presented his analysis of the energy readings. The alien fleet waiting at the edge of the solar system was massive, hundreds of ships, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built their weapons could probably destroy. Earth from a distance, without any risk to themselves, Kim-soo had studied the biological data from the alien transmission. The beings appeared to be from multiple different species working together. This galactic council was not just one race, but an entire civilization that spanned the galaxy. They had been doing this for thousands of years. President Cho Min listened to all the arguments and evidence. The room fell silent when she finally spoke. We have two choices: submit to slavery or fight for our freedom. I know what choice I would rather die making. Ambassador Park Ji nodded slowly. He had seen what happened when bullies were allowed to have their way. The aliens expected humanity to roll over and accept their demands, just like thousands of other species had done before. But humans were different. They had spent their entire history fighting against overwhelming odds. Li Wu thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was only 8 years old and deserved to grow up free. The captain made his decision in that moment. No matter what happened, he would not let these aliens take that freedom away. The vote was unanimous. Dr. Yun-ho was given emergency authorization to begin working on weapons that might actually hurt the aliens. Kim-soo started analyzing their biology, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. Park Ji began preparing humanity's official response to the Galactic Council. As the deadline approached, the alien fleet moved closer to Earth. They were confident that the primitive humans would see reason and submit like everyone else always did. They had done this thousands of times before, and it always ended the same way. But the aliens had never met humans before. Li Wu sat in the command center watching the countdown timer. He had prepared humanity's response. It was short and simple, but it would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. When the 24 hours were up, he activated the transmission system. The message went out to the waiting alien fleet traveling at the speed of light toward beings who expected to receive humanity's surrender. Instead, they got 4 words that changed everything. We respectfully decline your offer. The universe held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The Galactic Council had ruled for 10,000 years, crushing anyone who dared to resist, but Earth had just said no, and there was no taking it back. The war for humanity's freedom was about to begin. The alien response to Earth's refusal came faster than anyone expected. Captain Li Wu was still in the Luna Base Command Center when the communications array lit up with an incoming message. The same gray-skinned beings appeared in the hologram, but this time their calm demeanor was gone. Their large black eyes seemed to burn with anger, and their thin mouths were twisted into what might have been snarls. Your species has made a grave error. The lead alien spoke through the universal translator. We have offered you the chance to serve the galaxy with honor. Instead, you choose destruction. Very well, the fleet will advance, and your world will be cleansed. Your defiance ends now. The hologram flickered and vanished, leaving behind an ominous silence. Li Wu immediately activated the emergency broadcast system that would alert every military installation on Earth and throughout the solar system. The war that everyone hoped could be avoided was now inevitable. President Cho Min stood before the United Nations General Assembly, knowing that her next words would either inspire humanity or be among the last spoken by a free human leader. The assembly hall was packed beyond capacity with representatives from every nation on Earth. Outside, billions of people watched on television and computer screens, waiting to hear how their leader would face the greatest threat in human history. My fellow humans, she began, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what they were facing. We stand at a crossroads that will define not just our generation, but every generation that comes after us. The aliens who call themselves our masters have given us a choice: submit to slavery or face annihilation. She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in before continuing. But I say to you that this is no choice at all. Freedom is not something that can be bargained away or sold for the promise of safety. Our ancestors fought and died for the right to determine their own destiny. We will not surrender that right to beings who view us as property. The applause that erupted was thunderous. Representatives from nations that had been enemies for decades stood together, united by the common threat they faced. President Cho Min raised her hand for silence and continued, "We may be outnumbered, we may be outgunned, But we have something these aliens do not understand. We have the human spirit that has carried us from caves to the stars. We have the courage that built civilizations, and the determination that overcame every obstacle in our path. The vote that followed was unanimous. Every nation on Earth agreed to stand together against the alien invasion. There would be no surrender, no negotiation, no compromise. Earth would remain free or it would burn, but it would never kneel while politicians made speeches. Dr. Yoon Ho worked frantically in his underground laboratory. The quantum drive experiments he had been conducting for years suddenly became humanity's most important weapons project. He had been trying to create faster than light travel, but the same technology could be used to make weapons that would surprise the aliens. The quantum field manipulator he had built could theoretically tear holes in space-time itself. If he could weaponize it, the resulting quantum bombs might actually damage ships that were protected by energy shields thousands of years more advanced than human technology. The aliens expected primitive nuclear weapons and kinetic projectiles. They would not be prepared for weapons that attacked the very fabric of reality. Kim Soo worked alongside teams of biologists and doctors, studying every piece of data they had collected from the alien transmissions. The beings in the Galactic Council appeared to be from multiple species, but they all shared certain characteristics. They were clearly more advanced than humans, but they also seemed to follow predictable patterns in their behavior and biology. Her analysis revealed something interesting. The aliens appeared to be herbivore species that had evolved from plant-eating ancestors. This explained their shock at human defiance. Most herbivore species were naturally more passive and accepting of hierarchy. They expected other beings to submit to superior force because that was how their own psychology worked, but humans were different. Humans had evolved from hunters and scavengers who survived by being clever and aggressive when cornered. The aliens had made the mistake of thinking Earth would react like the other species they had conquered. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Ambassador Park Ji found himself in an unexpected position. As news of Earth's defiance spread across the galaxy, he began receiving secret communications from other worlds. Some messages came from species that were already part of the Galactic Council, offering intelligence about fleet movements and weapon capabilities. Others came from worlds that had been conquered generations ago and still harbored dreams of freedom. The galaxy, it seemed, was not as united under the Council as it appeared. Many species served only because they had no choice. When they learned that someone had finally said no to the Council, they wanted to help. The information flowing to Earth included detailed specifications of Council ship designs, weaknesses in their energy shields, and even the locations of major fleet staging areas. Captain Li Wu coordinated the defense preparations from Luna Base, while military commanders on Earth worked to implement plans that had never been tested in real combat. The human fleet was tiny compared to what was coming toward them, but they had advantages the aliens would not expect. Human ships had been designed for exploration and scientific research, but they could be quickly converted into weapons platforms. The asteroid mining equipment could be turned into kinetic projectiles. The deep space communication arrays could be used to jam enemy signals. Most importantly, the entire solar system could be turned into a fortress if they had enough time. The alien fleet was still days away, traveling at speeds that defied human understanding, but using routes that would bring them through the outer planets, where human defenses were strongest. Li Wu had positioned his forces throughout the asteroid belt, creating a maze of hidden bases and weapon platforms that would force the aliens to fight on human terms. Dr. Yoon Ho completed his first quantum disruption bomb just as the alien fleet reached Jupiter. The weapon was untested and might not work at all, but it represented something the Galactic Council had never faced before. Genuine innovation born from desperation. Humans had always been at their most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. Kim Soo made a disturbing discovery in her biological analysis. The alien species in the Council showed signs of genetic modification that had been performed over thousands of generations. They had been deliberately bred to be more docile and accepting of authority. This explained why no one had successfully resisted the Council before. The conquered species had literally been changed at the genetic level to prevent rebellion, but Humans were unmodified. They retained all the aggressive and creative instincts that had made them successful predators and survivors. The aliens were about to face an enemy that thought and acted in ways they could not predict or understand. As the enemy fleet approached the outer solar system, Ambassador Park G transmitted one final message to the Galactic Council. It would become one of the most famous communications in human history. "You mistake our kindness for weakness," Park G said, his voice calm but filled with quiet menace. "That was your first error, thinking that because we had not yet reached the stars, we would be easy prey. Your last error will be underestimating what humans do when you threaten everything they love." Message was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in the alien fleet would receive it, along with species throughout the galaxy who were watching to see if the impossible might actually happen. Earth waited. The aliens advanced, and somewhere in the darkness between worlds, the first shots of a war that would reshape the galaxy were about to be fired. The universe was about to learn what happened when you cornered the most dangerous species it had ever produced. The first battle lasted exactly 7 minutes and 14 seconds. Captain Li Wu watched from his command post on Ceres as the lead elements of the Galactic Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel near Jupiter. The alien ships were massive, elegant vessels that looked more like works of art than weapons of war. Their hulls gleamed with an inner light that spoke of technology far beyond human understanding. The Council fleet commanders were confident as they surveyed the inner solar system. Their sensors detected the primitive human ships hiding among the asteroids, but the readings showed nothing that could threaten vessels. Protected by energy shields that could stop the output of entire stars, the aliens had crushed rebellions before, and this would be no different. They were wrong. Dr. Ho triggered the first quantum disruption bomb when the alien fleet was halfway between Jupiter and the asteroid belt. The weapon had been hidden inside a derelict mining station that the aliens ignored as they passed. The explosion that followed was unlike anything ever seen in the history of warfare. Instead of fire and shrapnel, the quantum bomb created a sphere of absolute nothingness that expanded outward at the speed of light. Everything it touched simply ceased to exist. The first 3 alien ships vanished without even having time to send a distress signal. The space where they had been was empty, not just of matter, but of the quantum fields that allowed matter to exist at all. The alien fleet commander stared at his displays in shock. The readings made no sense according to every law of physics. He knew matter could not simply disappear like that, yet 3 of his most powerful warships were gone as if they had never existed at all before. He could process what had happened. The human attack began in earnest. Captain Li Wu had learned from every human conflict in history. The key to defeating a superior enemy was to never fight fair and never give them time to think. Asteroids that had seemed like random space rocks suddenly revealed themselves to be weapons platforms. Bristling with modified mining lasers and kinetic projectiles, the aliens tried to respond with their plasma cannons and particle beam weapons, but the humans were not where they expected them to be. Human ships used the asteroid belt like a 3-dimensional maze, appearing from behind cover long enough to fire, then disappearing again before the enemy could target them. Kim Soo monitored the battle from Earth while analyzing the biological data streaming back from the combat zone. Her engineered viruses had been loaded into every human weapon and were designed to spread through alien life support systems. The moment alien ships took damage, her biological weapons would infiltrate their atmosphere. The results exceeded her wildest expectations. The alien species had evolved in sterile environments for thousands of years. Their immune systems had never faced anything like terrestrial pathogens. Within minutes of the first hull breaches, the crews of damaged ships were falling ill with symptoms that their medical technology could not identify or treat. But the most devastating human weapon was not technological at all. It was psychological. The aliens had spent 10,000 years fighting civilized wars against civilized enemies who followed predictable rules of engagement. Humans followed no rules except survival when conventional weapons proved insufficient. Human pilots began ramming their ships into alien vessels. The aliens watched in horror as humans deliberately destroyed themselves to take enemy ships with them. This was beyond their understanding. No rational being would sacrifice their life For such minimal tactical gain, the alien fleet tried to retreat to regroup and assess this unexpected threat, but Li Wu had anticipated this. He had seeded the space around Jupiter with quantum mines that would detonate if the aliens tried to jump back to faster-than-light travel. The alien commander found his fleet trapped in a system that had become a killing field. Dr. Yun-ho activated the second phase of his quantum weapons. ARRAY hidden throughout the asteroid belt were resonance generators that could create destructive interference patterns in the quantum fields that held the alien ships together. The effect was like tuning forks that could shatter crystal, except the crystal was the fundamental structure of matter itself. Alien ships began coming apart at the molecular level, their hulls dissolving like sugar in water. The energy shields that could stop star fire were useless against weapons that attacked from inside the quantum realm. The aliens tried to send distress signals back to the main fleet, but human electronic warfare specialists had learned to turn the aliens' own quantum communication systems against them. Kim Soo released her second wave of biological weapons. These were not viruses, but engineered bacteria that could survive in space and reproduce rapidly. They attached themselves to alien ship hulls and began converting the hull material into more bacteria. Within hours, alien vessels were being eaten alive by microscopic organisms that treated advanced alien alloys like food. The battle that the aliens expected to win in minutes stretched into hours as human ingenuity found new ways to kill things that should have been unkillable. Captain Li Wu coordinated the defense with a level of tactical brilliance that surprised even himself. Every human advantage was maximized, every alien weakness exploited. When the surviving alien ships finally managed to retreat, they left behind a debris field that would puzzle an archaeologist for generations. The wreckage contained technology that should have been immune to the primitive weapons humans possessed. Yet somehow the impossible had happened. President Cho Min received the battle report while meeting with world leaders in the emergency command bunker beneath Seoul. The numbers seemed unreal. Human forces had engaged a fleet of 200 alien warships and destroyed over 60% of them while losing less than 30 human vessels. The casualty ratios were so lopsided that she initially thought there had been a mistake in the data transmission. Ambassador Park Ji immediately began broadcasting the battle results to every corner of the galaxy. The message was simple, but its implications were staggering. The Galactic Council fleet had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The myth of council invincibility had been shattered by human courage and creativity. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate. Worlds that had submitted to council rule thousands of years ago suddenly remembered what freedom looked like. Species that had been bred for docility began to dream of resistance. The carefully maintained order that had kept the galaxy peaceful and productive for 10 millennia was beginning to crack on. The council homeworld emergency sessions were called as leaders tried to understand how their most advanced fleet had been defeated by beings who had not even achieved faster-than-light travel. The reports from surviving ship commanders made no sense. Humans had used weapons that violated known physics and tactics that defied military logic. Dr. Yun-ho was already working on improvements to his quantum weapons. The first generation had been crude devices built in desperation, but now he understood the principles involved. The next wave of quantum bombs would be more efficient and could be deployed in larger numbers. The aliens would find that human weapons technology improved with frightening speed. Kim Soo began developing biological weapons specifically tailored to the genetic profiles of different council species. Her analysis of battle debris had provided her with biological samples from dozens of alien races. Each one would face customized pathogens designed to exploit their specific vulnerabilities, but perhaps the most important result of the battle was psychological. Humans had proven to themselves that they could fight beings from the stars and win the fear that had gripped Earth since the first alien message was being replaced by something far more dangerous to the Galactic Council: human confidence. Captain Li Wu prepared for the inevitable counterattack. The aliens would return with a larger fleet and better preparation, but humans would be ready. The solar system was being turned into the most heavily fortified star system in the galaxy, protected by weapons that the Council had never imagined. As news of the victory spread across Earth, celebrations erupted in every city. Humans danced in the streets not because the war was over, but because they had proven that it could be won. The species that had spent its entire history fighting against impossible odds had just scored the most impossible victory of all. The aliens had awakened something in humanity that 10,000 years of galactic peace had never encountered. They had made the mistake of threatening a species that viewed the impossible as merely another problem to solve. The Galactic Council was about to learn that there was a very good reason why humans had evolved as the dominant predator on their world. They were about to face that predator defending its home. News of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than the Galactic Council could suppress it. Within days of the battle at Jupiter, encrypted messages were bouncing between star systems carrying the impossible story of how a primitive world had defeated the mightiest fleet in known space. The carefully controlled information networks that had kept the galaxy peaceful for 10 millennia were suddenly buzzing with whispers of revolution. Ambassador Park G found himself overwhelmed with secret communications from across the galaxy. His secure channels were flooded with messages from species he had never heard of, offering everything from intelligence reports to military alliances. The Universal Translator worked overtime as dozens of different languages poured through the communication arrays. A message from the Kepler system arrived, first transmitted by beings called the Vel, who had been conquered by the Council 3,000 years ago. We have watched our oppressors for 30 centuries, waiting for someone to show us that resistance was possible. Now you have done the impossible. You have made the Council bleed. From the Vega system came technical specifications for Council weapon systems transmitted by a species that had been forced to manufacture military equipment for their conquerors. We give you these gifts freely, they wrote, because you have given us something more valuable than all the technology in the galaxy. Hope Dr. Yunho studied the alien technical data with growing excitement. The information pouring in from across the galaxy was more valuable than anything humans could have discovered on their own in weeks. He had learned more about advanced physics than human science had achieved in centuries. The quantum field equations alone would revolutionize human technology, but the most shocking revelation came from Kimsu analysis of biological samples provided by alien resistance movements. Her discovery would change everything humans thought they knew about the galaxy. The Galactic Council was not just a government built on military conquest. It was a carefully designed system of genetic control that had been operating for over 10,000 years. Every species under Council rule had been systematically modified over hundreds of generations to make them more docile and accepting of authority. The aliens had not just conquered worlds, they had conquered evolution itself. The natural aggressiveness and independence that might lead to rebellion had been bred out of entire species, leaving behind beings who were physically and mentally incapable of effective resistance. Kim Su presented her findings to the Emergency Council of World Leaders meeting in the Soul Bunker. The implications were staggering. The galaxy was not filled with naturally peaceful species that had chosen to accept Council rule. They were artificially peaceful because their ability to fight back had been genetically removed. This explains why no one has ever successfully resisted the Council before, she told President Cho Min and the assembled leaders. They did not just defeat rebellious species. They changed them at the genetic level to prevent future rebellions. We are facing an enemy that has turned evolution itself into a weapon. Captain Li Wu used this information to understand why human tactics had been so effective in battle. The aliens were not just technologically unprepared for human aggression, they were biologically incapable of thinking like humans did. Their modified genetics made them predictable in ways that natural evolution never would have allowed. But this discovery also revealed the true scale of what Earth was fighting. The Galactic Council was not just a military threat. It was a force that had systematically destroyed the natural diversity of intelligence in the galaxy. For 10,000 years, they had been creating a universe of slaves who could not even imagine freedom. The second wave of alien reinforcements arrived 3 weeks after the first battle. Captain Li Wu watched from his new command post deep inside the asteroid Vesta as sensors detected massive energy signatures emerging from faster-than-light travel near Saturn. This time the alien fleet was 3 times larger and had been equipped with weapons specifically designed to counter human quantum bombs. The aliens had learned from their first defeat. They no longer advanced in tight formations that could be destroyed by single quantum explosions. Instead, they spread out across the solar system, approaching from multiple directions simultaneously. Their new tactics showed that the Council was finally taking human resistance seriously. Dr. Yun-ho was ready for them, his second generation. Quantum weapons were smaller, more efficient, and could be produced in much larger quantities. The asteroid belt was now seeded with thousands of quantum mines, each one capable of creating localized space-time disruptions that would tear apart anything within a kilometer radius. But the aliens had surprises of their own. When they attacked this time, they used weapons that humans had never seen before. Energy beams that could bend around obstacles to strike targets and cover gravity weapons that could crush human ships from the inside out, temporal distortion fields that slowed human reactions to a crawl. The second battle was longer and more vicious than the first. Human casualties mounted as the aliens demonstrated why they had ruled the galaxy for so long. Their technology was not just advanced, it was backed by 10,000 years of military experience against every possible form of resistance. Captain Li Wu adapted his tactics in real time as human advantages were countered by alien innovation. The asteroid belt became a 3-dimensional battlefield where ships fought at ranges measured in light seconds, and weapons that could destroy planets were used like rifles. The space between Mars and Jupiter became a graveyard of shattered metal and exotic matter. Kim Soo released her newest biological weapons during the height of the battle. These were not simple viruses, but engineered organisms that could reproduce in the vacuum of space and were specifically designed to attack the life support systems of different alien species. The microscopic weapons spread from ship to ship like wildfire, turning the alien fleet against itself. The turning point came when Dr. Yun-ho activated his most desperate creation, a quantum resonance cascade that could destabilize the fundamental forces holding matter together across an entire star system. The weapon was so dangerous that using it might destroy the solar system itself, but with Earth facing annihilation, there was no choice. The cascade effect began at Jupiter and spread inward as quantum fields collapsed in a chain reaction that made space itself scream. Alien ships caught in the expanding wave of destruction simply ceased to exist, erased from reality as completely as if they had never been built. The effect stopped just short of the asteroid belt, leaving the human defenders alive in a bubble of stable space-time. When the battle ended, 2/3 of the second alien fleet had been destroyed. The survivors retreated in disorder, carrying news of weapons that should not exist and tactics that defied every principle of civilized warfare. The Galactic Council was beginning to understand that they were not facing a normal rebellion. Ambassador Park Ji received a communication that changed the nature of the conflict forever, a direct message from the Council homeworld offering to negotiate for the first time in their 10,000-year history. The Galactic Council was willing to treat another species as something approaching equals. President Cho Min read the alien message in the emergency bunker. Surrounded by advisors who could barely believe what they were seeing, the beings who had demanded total submission were now asking for talks. The species that had threatened to sterilize Earth was now suggesting that perhaps some accommodation could be reached, but the message also carried a warning. The Council controlled thousands of star systems and millions of ships. What Earth had faced so far was just the smallest fraction of their true military might. If negotiations failed, the next attack would involve enough firepower to crack planets and boil away atmospheres. Dr. Yun-ho studied the technical specifications that came with the message and realized the aliens were not bluffing. The quantum signatures he detected indicated weapons that could destabilize stars themselves. Earth had won 2 battles against advanced scouts, but the real war had not even begun. Kim Soo made a disturbing discovery while analyzing biological samples from the latest battle. The genetic modifications in Council species were not random. They followed a specific pattern designed to create the perfect servant race. The aliens had spent millennia turning evolution into a tool for creating willing slaves, but there was something else in the data, something that changed the entire strategic situation. The genetic modifications were not permanent. They could be reversed given Enough time and the right techniques, the slaves that the Council had created could potentially be turned back into free beings capable of fighting for their own liberation. Captain Li Wu prepared the solar system defenses for the possibility that negotiations would fail. His analysis of the two battles had revealed important information about Council weaknesses. Their ships were powerful, but they were also predictable. Their tactics were sophisticated, but they relied on overwhelming superiority rather than innovation. The galaxy watched and waited as two very different forms of intelligence prepared to meet across the negotiating table. On one side sat beings who had ruled through genetic control and overwhelming force for 10,000 years. On the other sat a species that had never learned how to surrender and saw every problem as something that could be solved with enough creativity and determination. The talks. The Galactic Council faced something they had never encountered in their 10,000-year reign, a species that refused to follow the script. Council leaders gathered in emergency session on their homeworld, a massive artificial construct that orbited a dying star and served as the center of galactic government. The chamber where they met had witnessed the submission of countless species, but never a negotiation between equals. President Cho Min received an unprecedented communication, not from the Council leadership but from individual member species, questioning whether the war against Earth was worth the cost. The message came through encrypted channels provided by alien resistance movements, and it revealed cracks in the Council's unity that had never existed before. We have served the Council faithfully for 3,000 years. The message began, transmitted by a species from the Rigel system, but the cost of this war grows higher every day. Our ships, our resources, our people are being sacrificed to punish one small world for the crime of saying no. We begin to wonder if the price of maintaining order has become too high. Similar messages arrived from dozens of other systems. Council member species were starting to question not just the war against Earth, but the entire system of galactic governance that had seemed unshakable for millennia. The human refusal to submit had planted seeds of doubt in minds that had been bred for obedience. Dr. Yun Ho completed his most terrifying creation while the political situation across the galaxy continued to deteriorate. Working in deep underground laboratories, he had developed a weapon that could destabilize entire star systems by disrupting the quantum fields that held stellar matter together. He called it the Nova Bomb because it could turn any star into a supernova. The weapon was too dangerous to test, but theoretical calculations suggested it could work. The quantum field equations provided by alien resistance movements had given him the knowledge needed to build something that could literally destroy suns. The mere existence of such a weapon sent shockwaves through Council intelligence networks. When news of the Nova bomb reached the Council homeworld, the reaction was immediate panic. Technology that could destroy stars had been theoretical for thousands of years. No species had ever been insane enough to actually build such weapons. The humans had crossed a line that even the Council had never dared to approach. Captain Li Wu realized that humanity's greatest weapon was no longer their technology but their reputation. The galaxy was watching a species fight with such ferocity and innovation that even their enemies were beginning to respect them. Fear was transforming into admiration, and admiration was becoming inspiration for oppressed worlds everywhere. Reports reached Earth of spontaneous rebellions breaking out across the galaxy. Species that had been docile for centuries were suddenly remembering how to fight the genetic modifications that had made them obedient, were being overcome by something stronger. The example of a world that had refused to kneel. Kim Su made a discovery that would reshape the entire conflict while analyzing genetic samples provided by the alien resistance. Her breakthrough came when she realized that the Council genetic modifications were not just about creating obedience, they were about preventing evolution itself. The aliens had not just conquered species, they had stopped them from changing. The genetic locks that prevented rebellion also prevented adaptation, innovation, and the natural development of new capabilities. The Council had created a galaxy of species that could never grow beyond their current limitations, but humans were unmodified. They retained the full evolutionary potential that the Council had spent millennia suppressing. This explained why human tactics were so unpredictable and human technology advanced So rapidly humans were fighting with the full creative potential of natural evolution while their enemies were limited by artificial genetic constraints. The implications were staggering. If other species could have their genetic modifications reversed, they would regain not just the ability to rebel, but the capacity for innovation that the Council had stolen from them. The war was not just about Earth freedom, it was about restoring the natural evolutionary potential of every species in the galaxy. Ambassador Park G found himself coordinating a galactic resistance movement from his office in Seoul. Secure communications flowed between Earth and dozens of star systems as the network of rebel species grew stronger every day. The aliens who had once offered to negotiate were now facing the possibility of empire-wide revolt. The breaking point came when the Council attempted to deploy their ultimate weapon, a device that could sterilize entire solar systems by destroying the quantum fields that allowed complex matter to exist. Dr. Yun Ho detected the massive energy signatures as the weapon was transported toward Earth aboard the most heavily defended ship in the Council fleet. President Cho Min faced the hardest decision in human history. The Council super weapon could destroy Earth completely, but using the Nova bomb in response would trigger a war that could literally tear the galaxy apart. The choice was between certain death for humanity or possible extinction for everyone. The decision was made when Captain Li Wu intercepted a Council transmission revealing their true intentions. The superweapon would not just destroy Earth, it would be used to sterilize every world that had shown signs of rebellion. The Council was preparing to commit genocide on a galactic scale rather than risk losing control. Dr. Yun Ho activated the Nova bomb targeting the red giant star in the Arcturus system, where the Council maintained one of their largest military installations. The quantum cascade that followed could be seen from hundreds of light years away as the star collapsed and then exploded in a supernova that outshone entire galaxies. The psychological effect was immediate and devastating. The Council had ruled through fear for 10,000 years, but now they were the ones who were afraid. Species across the galaxy realized that the humans possessed weapons that could destroy not just ships or worlds, but entire solar systems. The balance of terror that had maintained galactic order was completely reversed. Council member species began openly defecting as news of the Arcturus supernova spread. Worlds that had served faithfully for millennia suddenly declared independence and requested human military assistance. The empire that had seemed eternal was dissolving as fear of the Council was replaced by fear of what humans might do next. Kim Soo began working with alien scientists to develop treatments that could reverse the genetic modifications imposed by the Council. The process would take generations, but for the first time in thousands of years, conquered species had hoped that their children might be born free. The galaxy was beginning to remember what natural evolution looked like. The final negotiation came when the Council leadership sent a direct message to Earth offering complete independence in exchange for a promise that no more stars would be destroyed. President Cho Min's response was brief and to the point. Independence was never yours to give. We were born free and we will die free. The only question is whether the rest of the galaxy will join us. Ambassador Park G transmitted the message to every corner of known space, along with detailed instructions for building quantum weapons and biological treatments for genetic modification. The technology that could free the galaxy was being given away freely to anyone with the courage to use it. Captain Li Wu prepared for what everyone knew would be the final battle. The Council was mobilizing everything they had left in one desperate attempt to maintain their authority. But the humans had allies now and weapons that could destroy suns. The empire that had lasted 10 millennia was about to face an enemy it had created through its own oppression. Dr. Yun Ho worked on his next generation of quantum weapons, knowing that the coming battle would determine whether the galaxy continued under the old order of genetic slavery or began a new age of freedom. The technology that could liberate entire worlds was finally in the hands of beings who remembered how to fight. The universe was about to witness the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history, a coalition of free species working together not through conquest and control, but through choice and cooperation. The Council had spent 10,000 years trying to create the perfect galactic order. They were about to discover that perfection was the enemy of freedom, and that freedom, once awakened, could not be Put back to sleep, the final confrontation was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The negotiations took place aboard Harmony Station, a massive neutral facility that had been built in the empty space between galaxies. Where no species could claim territorial advantage, the station had witnessed the signing of countless surrender documents over the centuries, but never anything like what was about to happen. President Cho Min walked through corridors designed for beings 3 times her size, surrounded by architecture that spoke of technologies beyond human comprehension. Yet she moved with the confidence of someone who represented a species that had changed the fundamental balance of power in the universe. The humans were no longer petitioners seeking mercy, they were equals, demanding recognition. The council delegation was unlike anything that had ever gathered in galactic history. Instead of the usual representatives of member species, the table included beings who had never before been allowed to speak for themselves. Former slave worlds had sent ambassadors to negotiate their own freedom. Species that had been genetically modified for obedience were represented by individuals who had undergone Kim Su experimental treatments to restore their natural evolutionary potential. Dr. Yun Ho attended as humanity's chief scientific advisor, his presence serving as a constant reminder of what would happen if the negotiations failed. His quantum weapons had already destroyed 1 star system and demonstrated that humans possessed the technology to destabilize the entire galaxy if necessary. The aliens who had once dismissed human technology as primitive now spoke of it with fearful respect. The first demand presented by Earth was simple recognition of human sovereignty and the right of all species to govern themselves without interference. The Council representatives who had expected to negotiate the terms of humanity's surrender instead found themselves being asked to surrender their own authority. Ambassador Park Ji presented the evidence that Kim Su had compiled over months of research, detailed genetic analysis proving that the Council had systematically modified conquered species to make them incapable of effective resistance. The revelation sent shockwaves through the galactic community, as species that had thought their docility was natural realized they had been artificially changed. We demand not just freedom for Earth, he told the assembled delegates, but freedom for every world that has been genetically enslaved by the Council. The modifications that were imposed without consent must be reversed. The natural evolutionary potential that was stolen must be restored. The Council leadership found themselves in an impossible position. They faced a coalition of species that included not just humans, but dozens of their former subjects who had learned to fight again. The military balance had shifted dramatically as human quantum weapons technology spread through the resistance networks. Captain Li Wu had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a human commanding multi-species fleets in battles for liberation. His tactics had been studied and copied by resistance movements across the galaxy. His success in turning entire star systems into fortresses had inspired similar defensive preparations on hundreds of worlds. The aliens who had once demanded Earth's submission now found themselves begging for terms that would allow them to retain some measure of authority. The empire that had controlled the galaxy for 10,000 years was dissolving as world after world declared independence and requested human military assistance. Kim Su had established research centers on dozens of liberated worlds, working to develop treatments that could reverse millennia of genetic modification. The process was slow and difficult, but for the first time in thousands of years, conquered species were having children who retained the capacity for independent thought and action. The breakthrough came when she discovered that the genetic modifications were not just physical, but included quantum mechanical alterations to the very structure of alien DNA. The Council had not just changed their subjects' bodies, they had changed the fundamental information that defined their existence, but human quantum technology could reverse even these changes. Dr. Yun Ho quantum field manipulators could rewrite genetic information at the subatomic level, restoring the original evolutionary patterns that the Council had suppressed. The liberation of the galaxy would not just be political but biological. President Cho Min presented the final terms of the agreement. The Galactic Council would dissolve as a governing authority, replaced by a federation of free worlds where each species would have an equal voice in galactic affairs. All genetic modifications imposed without consent would be reversed using human technology made freely available to anyone who requested that the military forces of the former council would be disbanded with their ships and weapons either destroyed or converted to peaceful purposes. The massive fleets that had enforced galactic order for millennia would become exploration vessels and emergency response units serving the needs of free worlds rather than maintaining imperial control. Most importantly, the agreement established the principle that no species could claim authority over another based on technological advancement or military superiority. The days when might made right in galactic affairs were ending, replaced by a system based on cooperation and mutual respect. The signing ceremony lasted for days as representatives from thousands of worlds added their agreement to the document that would reshape galactic civilization. Captain Li Wu signed on behalf of the Earth Defense Forces, while Kim Su represented the scientific community that had made liberation possible. Dr. Yunho added his signature, knowing that his quantum weapons technology was now being shared freely with any species that wanted to defend their freedom. The balance of power that had allowed the Council to rule through fear was permanently destroyed. Ambassador Park Ji became the first human representative to the new Galactic Federation, serving as a voice for species that were still learning how to speak for themselves. His diplomatic skills had helped forge alliances between worlds that had been enemies for centuries, united now by their shared experience of liberation from Council rule. The transformation of galactic civilization did not happen overnight. It took years for the genetic treatments to spread to all the worlds that needed them. Generations would pass before the full effects of restored evolutionary potential could be seen, but the change had begun and it could not be stopped on Earth. The victory was celebrated not just as a military triumph, but as proof that freedom was the natural state of intelligent life. President Cho Min addressed the United Nations one final time as a wartime leader, speaking to a world that had learned it could stand against any threat. We have shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. She said that courage is contagious, that freedom cannot be destroyed, only temporarily suppressed, and that sometimes the smallest voice saying no can bring down the mightiest empire. The former council worlds began to rediscover technologies and capabilities that had been suppressed for millennia. Species that had been bred for specific functions started to develop new talents and interests. Art, music, and literature flourished as beings who had been designed to be workers and soldiers remembered how to be individuals. Captain Li Wu established the first multi-species military academy where beings from across the galaxy could learn human tactics and quantum weapons technology. The goal was not to create new conquerors, but to ensure that no species would ever again be defenseless against those who sought to enslave them. Kim Su continued her research into genetic restoration, working with alien scientists who brought perspectives that human researchers could never have imagined. The collaboration between species that had once been impossible under Council rule led to breakthroughs that advanced medical science by thousands of years. Dr. Yunho found himself at the center of a technological renaissance as freed species began to innovate and experiment in ways they had been prevented from doing for millennia. The quantum technologies that had started as weapons of war became the foundation for peaceful applications that transformed galactic civilization. The new Galactic Federation established its headquarters on a world that had been one of the Council's most brutal prison planets. The symbolism was intentional. Where oppression had once reigned, freedom would now flourish. The constitution that governed the Federation included principles that would have been impossible under the old order. No species would be allowed to claim superiority over another regardless of their technological advancement or military power. All genetic modifications must be consensual and reversible. Every world would have the right to govern itself according to its own values and traditions. The Federation would serve its members, not rule them. Trade and cultural exchange flourished as barriers that had existed for millennia were suddenly removed. Species that had been kept separate by Council policy began to share knowledge and resources freely. The galaxy became more diverse and more innovative than it had been in 10,000 years, but perhaps the most important change was psychological. The fear that had kept the galaxy passive and obedient was replaced by something the Council had never understood hope. Beings who had been told they were naturally inferior discovered that they were capable of greatness when given the chance to try. Earth became a center of learning and innovation as beings from across the galaxy came to study human methods of problem solving and conflict resolution. The species that had been dismissed as primitive became teachers too.